The NFL just dropped a bombshell that has every fan, analyst, and insider on high alert. We're talking about a meeting that could reshape the entire landscape of professional football as we know it. Rule changes that might flip the game on its head. Playoff formats that could ignite wars between owners, coaches, and fan bases. And behind closed doors, some of the most powerful people in sports are about to make decisions that will echo through stadiums for decades. This isn't just another routine gathering. This is the kind of moment where fortunes shift, legacies are built or destroyed, and the very soul of America's favorite sport hangs in the balance. Buckle up, because what's coming could change everything you thought you knew about the NFL. But before we dive deep into this explosive story, if you want to stay ahead of every twist, every controversy, and every insider secret in the world of sports, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. So, here's what we know. NFL owners are preparing for what insiders are calling one of the most critical meetings in recent league history. And when you have 32 of the wealthiest, most competitive individuals in sports gathering in one room, you know the stakes are astronomical. These aren't just business executives. These are empire builders who've poured billions into their franchises, and every single decision made at this table has the potential to either catapult them into dynasty territory or sink them into mediocrity. The whispers started circulating weeks ago, but now multiple sources have confirmed that the agenda for this meeting is loaded with proposals that could fundamentally alter how the NFL operates, how teams compete, and most importantly, how champions are crowned. Let's start with the playoff format, because this is where things get absolutely wild. For years, the NFL has operated under a system that most fans understand. 7 teams from each conference make it to the postseason, with the top seed getting a bye week. It's straightforward, it's dramatic, and it creates those do-or-die scenarios that make January football so electrifying. But there's been growing pressure from certain ownership groups to expand the playoffs even further. Some are pushing for an 8-team format in each conference, which would mean 16 total teams fighting for the Lombardi Trophy. On the surface, it sounds like more football, more excitement, more opportunities. But dig deeper, and you realize this is about money, leverage, and control. The owners advocating for expansion argue that it increases revenue streams, brings more fan bases into playoff contention late in the season, and keeps television ratings sky high through December. Networks love it because it means more marquee games, more advertising slots, and more eyeballs glued to screens. But here's where the drama kicks in. There's a massive faction of owners who are vehemently opposed to this idea. Their argument? Diluting the playoff pool cheapens the regular season. If half the league makes the postseason, what's the incentive to fight tooth and nail for every single win? What happens to the intensity, the desperation, the edge-of-your-seat battles that define NFL Sundays? These traditionalist owners believe that expanding the playoffs turns the NFL into something closer to the NBA or NHL, where making the postseason becomes the baseline expectation rather than the ultimate achievement. And it's not just about philosophy, it's about competitive advantage. Teams in smaller markets, teams without superstar quarterbacks, teams that have been rebuilding for years suddenly have a clearer path to sneaking into the playoffs with a 9-win season or even an 8-win season. Meanwhile, the powerhouse franchises that have invested billions in elite rosters, state-of-the-art facilities, and championship infrastructure could find themselves facing a gauntlet of wildcard opponents who have nothing to lose. Imagine a scenario where a dominant 14-win team gets upset in the first round by a scrappy 9-win underdog. It happens now, sure, but expanding the field makes those upsets even more likely. For owners of elite franchises, that's a nightmare. For owners of perennial underdogs, it's a golden opportunity. But the playoff format is just the tip of the iceberg. The real fireworks are expected to come from proposed rule changes, and some of these are so controversial that they've already sparked heated debates in league circles. One of the most talked about proposals involves expanding the use of instant replay and challenging decisions. Right now, coaches get 2 challenges per game, and the booth can review certain plays in the final 2 minutes. But there's a growing movement to allow challenges on pass interference calls throughout the entire game, to expand reviewable plays to include holding penalties, and to give coaches more opportunities to contest officiating decisions. On one hand, this sounds like a step toward fairness and accuracy. After all, nobody wants to see a championship decided by a blown call. But on the other hand, this could slow the game to a crawl. Football is already a 3-hour marathon with commercial breaks, timeouts, and injury stoppages. Adding more stoppages for reviews could kill the momentum, frustrate fans, and turn what should be an adrenaline-fueled spectacle into a tedious chess match. Then there's the question of player safety and how it intersects with the rules of the game. The NFL has spent the last decade trying to make football safer. Targeting rules, roughing the passer, defenseless receiver protections. But some owners and coaches believe the pendulum is swung too far. They argue that the game has become overly sanitized, that defenses can't play aggressively without risking flags and fines, and that offensive players are essentially untouchable. There's a proposal on the table to revisit some of these rules, to give defenders more leeway in certain situations, and to recalibrate what constitutes a penalty versus what's just hard-nosed football. This is a minefield, though, because player safety is non-negotiable in the eyes of the Players Association, medical experts, and a large segment of the fan base. Any rollback of safety measures would trigger immediate backlash, lawsuits, and potentially a public relations disaster for the league.
Another explosive topic that's expected to dominate the meeting is the NFL's international expansion and how it affects the playoff structure. The league has been aggressively pursuing games in London, Munich, Mexico City, and other global markets. There's even talk of establishing a permanent franchise in Europe within the next decade. But here's the problem. How do you fairly integrate international games into a playoff seeding system? If a team is forced to play multiple games overseas, dealing with jet lag, unfamiliar stadiums, and hostile crowds, does that put them at a disadvantage compared to teams that get to stay home? Some owners are pushing for a system where international games don't count toward playoff seeding or are somehow weighted differently. Others argue that's absurd, that every game should matter equally, and that if you can't handle the travel, you don't deserve to be in the postseason. And then there's the money. Because at the end of the day, everything in the NFL comes down to money. The revenue-sharing model that's kept the league competitive for decades is under scrutiny. Big market teams are tired of subsidizing small market teams. They argue that if they're generating more ticket sales, more merchandise revenue, and more media attention, why should they be forced to share that wealth with franchises that can't fill their stadiums? Meanwhile, small market teams argue that without revenue sharing, the NFL turns into a European soccer league where only a handful of teams can ever compete and the rest are just there to collect paychecks. This tension has been simmering for years, but it's reached a boiling point. Some insiders believe that if the revenue-sharing model is altered significantly, it could fracture the league in ways we've never seen before. There's also the issue of the draft and how playoff expansion affects draft order. Right now, the worst teams get the highest picks, which theoretically helps maintain competitive balance. But if you expand the playoffs, you're essentially rewarding mediocrity. A 9-win team that sneaks into the postseason could end up picking higher in the draft than a 10-win team that missed out due to tiebreakers. That creates perverse incentives. Teams might start tanking late in the season to secure better draft position, knowing they're not making the playoffs anyway. Or worse, teams might intentionally lose playoff games to preserve draft capital. The integrity of the game is at stake here, and owners know it. Let's not forget the television networks, because they have a massive say in all of this. The NFL's broadcast deals are worth tens of billions of dollars, and the networks want maximum drama, maximum storylines, and maximum ratings. They're pushing hard for playoff expansion because it means more games to broadcast, more playoff races to hype, and more commercials to sell. But they're also pushing for rule changes that make the game more offense-friendly because casual fans tune in to see touchdowns and explosive plays, not 3-hour defensive slugfests. So there's pressure from the networks to legislate defense out of existence, to make every game a high-scoring shootout, and to prioritize entertainment over tradition. Some purists in the league are horrified by this, but the reality is that television money keeps the NFL machine running, and if the networks want something, they usually get it.
Behind all of this is the looming shadow of the players' union. Any significant rule changes or playoff adjustments will need to be negotiated with the players, and they're not going to give anything away for free. If the owners want an expanded playoff format, the players will demand a bigger share of the revenue. If the owners want to roll back certain safety protections, the players will fight it tooth and nail. The collective bargaining agreement is always a powder keg, and this meeting could light the fuse for the next round of labor negotiations. Some insiders believe that the owners are using this meeting to test the waters, to gauge how much resistance they'll face from the players before they formally propose anything. It's a high-stakes game of poker, and nobody's showing their cards yet. There's also the matter of competitive integrity and how these changes affect the perception of fairness. Fans are already cynical about officiating, about favoritism towards certain franchises, about the league manipulating outcomes to create storylines. If the NFL starts tinkering with the playoff format, changing rules midstream and altering the structure of the season, that cynicism will only deepen. Conspiracy theories will run rampant. Every controversial call will be seen as evidence of a rigged system. The league's credibility is on the line, and one wrong move could alienate millions of fans who already feel like the game is slipping away from them. And let's talk about the coaches and players who have to operate under these new rules. They're professionals, they'll adapt, but nobody likes having the rug pulled out from under them. Imagine spending your entire career mastering a certain style of play, only to have the league change the rules overnight. Defensive coordinators who've built their schemes around aggressive coverage suddenly can't touch a receiver without drawing a flag. Offensive coordinators who've perfected the art of ball control and clock management find themselves in a league that rewards nothing but deep shots and highlight reel plays. Players who've trained their entire lives to play a certain way are told that the game they grew up with doesn't exist anymore. That creates resentment, frustration, and a sense that the soul of football is being sacrificed at the altar of entertainment and profit. There's also the historical context to consider. The NFL has always been a league that evolves, but some of the greatest moments in its history came from the existing format. The 2007 Giants upsetting the undefeated Patriots, the 2017 Eagles winning it all as underdogs, the dynasties, the Cinderella stories, the heartbreaks, all of that happened under the current system. If you change the system, you risk losing the magic that made those moments possible. Yes, the league needs to stay modern, needs to adapt to new audiences and new technologies, but there's a fine line between evolution and destruction, and based on the whispers coming out of league offices, some owners believe that line is about to be crossed. What makes this meeting even more dramatic is the political maneuvering happening behind the scenes. Alliances are being formed, votes are being counted, and deals are being cut. Owners who have been rivals for decades are suddenly working together to block proposals they see as threats. Commissioners and league executives are scrambling to find compromise positions that can satisfy both sides. But the reality is that on issues this big, there might not be a middle ground. You either expand the playoffs or you don't. You either change the rules or you don't. And when the votes are cast, there will be winners and losers, and the losers aren't going to forget. The timing of this meeting is also critical. We're heading into a new era of the NFL, with young superstar quarterbacks, exploding salary caps, and unprecedented media attention. The decisions made in this room will shape the league for the next decade or more. Will the NFL prioritize tradition and competitive balance, or will it chase maximum revenue and global expansion at any cost? Will the game remain recognizable to longtime fans, or will it morph into something entirely different? These aren't abstract questions. They have real, tangible consequences for everyone involved, from the billionaire owners to the die-hard fans who bleed their team's colors. And here's the kicker. None of this is happening in a vacuum. The sports world is watching. The media is dissecting every rumor. Fans are debating on social media, breaking down every possible scenario, predicting which owners will vote which way, and preparing for the fallout. Because make no mistake, whatever happens in this meeting will send shockwaves through the league. Teams will adjust their strategies, coaches will rethink their game plans, and front offices will scramble to adapt to the new reality. Some franchises will thrive under the new system, exploiting loopholes and maximizing opportunities. Others will struggle, clinging to outdated methods and watching their competitors pull ahead. The drama doesn't end with the vote either. If controversial changes are approved, expect lawsuits, protests from fans, and possibly even legal challenges. The players' union could file grievances, arguing that the changes violate the collective bargaining agreement. Television networks could demand renegotiations of their contracts. Sponsors might pull out if they believe the changes damage the brand. This is a domino effect that could reshape the entire sports landscape, and it all starts with one meeting, one vote, one decision.
So where does this leave us? We're standing at a crossroads, watching the most powerful people in football prepare to make choices that will define the league for generations. The outcome is far from certain. The debates will be fierce, the arguments will be passionate, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about rule changes or playoff formats. It's about the identity of the NFL, the integrity of competition, and the future of a sport that millions of people love with every fiber of their being. As this story continues to unfold, we'll be tracking every development, every leak, every insider report, because this is the kind of moment that defines eras. This is the kind of decision that people will look back on decades from now and say, that's when everything changed. Whether that change is for better or worse remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the NFL will never be the same after this meeting concludes.